Trick or treat. As a child, the thrill of dressing up in a spooky costume and trick-or-treating under the moonlit sky held a special place in my heart. But as I grew older, my enthusiasm waned, replaced by a nagging sense of unease. It all began with the strange neighbor, Mr. Lawson, who lived at the end of our block. He was a recluse, the kind of person who rarely ventured beyond his overgrown yard. His unkempt appearance and odd mannerisms earned him a reputation as the town eccentric. That fateful Halloween, my friends and I decided to brave our fears and include Mr. Lawson's house on our trick-or-treating route. We approached his front porch with caution, our flashlights casting shadows on his dilapidated building. His front door creaked open, revealing a dimly lit room with a table covered in candy. Mr. Lawson stood in the corner, a crooked smile on his face as he beckoned us to come inside. We exchanged nervous glances, but cautiously entered, thinking he might try changing his reclusive ways. The room was filled with the scent of candy, and the table was covered in an array of tempting treats. As we reached for the candy, I noticed something odd about Mr. Lawson's grin. It was unnervingly wide, too wide for a simple act of neighborly kindness. My unease deepened when I noticed that some of the candy wrappers appeared to be sloppily resealed. I whispered a warning to my friends, but we were all reluctant to believe the worst. Ignoring the ominous feeling in the pit of my stomach, I selected a piece of candy. Just as I was about to take a bite, something gleamed in the light. I froze, my heart pounding, as I realized a razor blade had been carefully embedded into the candy. Panic set in as I examined the other treats on the table, finding more of the sinister surprises. Mr. Lawson's sinister smile grew wider as he watched us discover the razors. We screamed and fled his house, leaving behind the deadly candy and the disturbing neighbor. We knew we had to tell our parents and the authorities, but the terror of that moment stayed with us long after Halloween had passed. The police investigated and discovered that Mr. Lawson had a dark past. He had been targeting children for years, inserting razors into the candy he handed out, hoping to harm unsuspecting visitors. Our narrow escape from his house haunted our nightmares, and the once beloved Halloween holiday had become a chilling reminder of the horrors that could lurk behind closed doors. Mr. Lawson was arrested, and the town breathed a collective sigh of relief, but I couldn't help but think what would have happened that night had we eaten that candy. Would he have kept us there and planned on doing something way worse? I didn't dare to think any farther than that, but it certainly was a possibility. We wanted treats, but we could have been tricked into something way worse that night. The Convict. Halloween night was always thrilling for me. The crisp autumn air, the rustle of leaves underfoot, and the echoes of laughter from costumed children filled the streets. But this Halloween night, it turned out to be a lot more scary than it was fun. As darkness fell, I joined my group of friends for our annual tradition of trick-or-treating. Dressed as classic movie monsters, we set off into the neighborhood, determined to collect as much candy as possible. Our enthusiasm was infectious, but the atmosphere took a sudden shift when we heard the wail of police sirens in the distance. Our neighborhood was always peaceful, and such sounds were rare. We brushed it off as a typical Halloween prank and continued our quest for sweets. As we ventured deeper into the neighborhood, my heart began to race. We heard more sirens pass through. It was then that a neighbor hurriedly approached us, panic etched on his face. He whispered urgently, "There's a convict on the loose. The police are searching for him, so please be careful." Chills ran down my spine as the words sank in. An escaped convict on Halloween night? It sounded like something straight out of a horror movie, but this time it was real. We knew we had to stay vigilant, so we stuck together and hurriedly visited the remaining houses. Plus, what was the chances that he would come and find us? The night grew darker, and an unsettling silence descended over our neighborhood. It was as if Halloween completely ended once everyone heard there was an escaped convict. As we made our way back home, We noticed the streets had emptied, and the once festive atmosphere turned into tense quiet. Then, the only thing we heard was footsteps approaching from behind us. We turned to see a figure in an orange jumpsuit emerging from the dark. He wore a Halloween mask, and his face was obscured, but his movements were erratic and unpredictable. It didn't take long to realize that this was no Halloween costume. Panic coursed through our group as we realized this man fit the description of the escaped convict. Fear clung to us like a heavy shroud as we watched him approach, and we knew we had to run. We broke into a quick 180, turning around and sprinting away. As soon as we started sprinting, we heard him start too. We sprinted through the dark streets, our breaths coming in incredibly heavy. The convict's footsteps grew louder, and we could feel his presence coming closer. With no time to spare, we reached my house and slammed the door behind us, calling for my parents. We eventually called the police, who arrived quickly and searched the whole premises for the escaped convict. They had found him, hiding in a bush in our backyard. We were safe, but the memory of that Halloween night would haunt us for years to come. The holiday had been transformed from a night of fun and adventure into a nightmarish ordeal that, quite frankly, reminded us of a real-life Michael Myers. Town legend. Every small town has its own horror story, or legend that's been passed down through the prior inhabitants living there. This time was no different. It was Halloween, and we wanted to go explore and see if these tales were truly true. As we went from house to house, our bags filled with candy, we couldn't help but overhear the hushed whispers of townsfolk. There was a story they'd tell, one that had been passed down for generations. It was about an old abandoned house at the edge of town, tucked away from the bright lights and laughter of Halloween festivities. The house was known as Blackwell Manor, and the legend claimed it was cursed. Intrigued by the chilling tales, we decided to investigate. The Blackwell Manor had a daunting presence, its windows boarded up and the yard overgrown with weeds. We tried to find our way inside, of course, breaking the trespassing laws. There was one window that was already open, so we figured it was best to go in through there and not cause any more damage. The interior was decayed, filled with the remnants of a forgotten era. Dust-covered furniture, broken glass, and ominous silence hung heavy. The legend stated that a wicked family known as the Blackwells had lived here, practicing dark rituals and making pacts with evil forces. They had disappeared mysteriously, and nobody ever heard from them ever again. We explored room after room, and the air grew colder with each step. A low hum filled the house, and we all froze. It was kind of a comforting hum, and to be quite honest, we weren't too terrified, but being in the dark made it a lot more scary. Fear gnawed at our courage as we realized we weren't alone in here. Shadowy figures moved in the corners of the room, their presence unmistakable. The Blackwell family, or what remained of them, had returned from the depths of the legend. As far as we could tell, the stories so far were true. We fled to the basement, where the hum was deafening. A faint light flickered, revealing a sinister altar and a book filled with incantations and dark symbols. With trembling hands, I read the pages, and a sense of dread washed over me. The incantation spoke of confronting the truth behind the legend. My friends and I exchanged looks, our faces pale with realization. We admitted the legend might hold more truth than we dared to believe, that the Blackwells were indeed real, and we'd reawaken their presence. The room quaked as we confessed our fear. As our words hung in the air, the humming ceased, and a haunting wail filled the room. The Blackwells faded into the shadow, and we ran out of the basement. We figured that was enough for a Halloween night, and we all returned home, forever thinking about that legend and how it became true.